Welcome, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, to Black World TV, the new black media, your black and intelligent news source. Well, this video broadcast is about the coronavirus slash COVID-19 pandemic and its relationship to the 5G network and its electromagnetic radiation and how it affects us as human beings. So without further ado, I'm going to play a little bit of some audio, and then I'll come back with some commentary afterwards.
In 1918, after the biggest pandemic, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918, Steiner was asked, what was this all about? And he said, well, viruses are simply excretions of a toxic cell. Let me skip that for a minute. So what happened in 1918? There was a huge, in every pandemic in the last 150 years, there was a quantum leap in the electrification of the Earth. In 1918, late fall of 1917, there was the introduction of radio waves around the world. Whenever you expose any biological system to a new electromagnetic field, you poison it, you kill some, and the rest go into a kind of suspended animation, so that interestingly, they live a little bit longer and sicker. And then starts in World War II with the next pandemic, with the introduction of radar equipment all over the Earth, blanketing the entire Earth in radar fields. First time humans have ever been exposed to that. In 1968, there was the Hong Kong flu, and it was the first time the Earth has a protective layer in the Van Allen belt, which essentially integrates the cosmic fields from the sun and the Earth, from the moon and Jupiter, etc., integrates that and essentially distributes that to the living beings of the Earth. And we put satellites emitting radioactive frequencies in the Van Allen belt. Within 6 months, we had a new viral pandemic. Why viral? Because the people are poisoned, they excrete toxins, they look like viruses. People think it's a flu epidemic. In the 1918 epidemic, the Boston Health Department decided to investigate the contagiousness of this. So they, believe it or not, took hundreds of people with the flu and they sucked the snot out of their nose and injected it into the healthy people who didn't have the flu, and not one time could they make the next person sick. They did this over and over again, and they were not able to demonstrate contagion. They even did it with horses who apparently got the Spanish flu, and they put bags over their head, and the horses sneezed in the bag, and they put the bag over the next horse, and not one horse got sick. You can read about this in a book called The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, who chronicles all the steps in the electrification of the Earth and how within 6 months there was a new flu pandemic all over the world. And when you hear the normal explanations, how did it go from Kansas to South Africa in 2 weeks, so the entire world got the symptoms at the same time, in spite of the fact that the mode of transportation was horseback and boats, and there's no explanation for it. They just say, we don't know how that happened. But when you think about it, with these radio waves and other frequencies that some of you have in your pocket and on your wrist, you can send a signal to Japan and it arrives instantaneously. So any of you who don't believe there is an electromagnetic field that communicates globally within seconds just is not paying attention to this. And I will only finish by pointing out that there has been a dramatic and quantum leap in the last 6 months with the electrification of the Earth. And I'm sure a lot of you know what that is. It's called 5G, where they now have 20,000 radiation emitting satellites, just like the radiation emitting thing in your pocket and on your wrist and that you use all the time. That is not compatible with health. I'm sorry to say it, it's not compatible with health. That is a water destructuring device. And for any of you who say, yeah, well, we're not electrical beings, we're just physical matter, then don't bother doing an EKG or an EEG or a nerve conduction test, because we are electrical beings and the chemicals are only the byproduct of those electrical impulses. And I'll finish with, anybody want to make one guess as to where the first completely blanketed 5G city in the world was? Exactly. So when
Wuhan,
you start
China.
thinking about this, the susceptibility has to do with how much metal you have in your body, as well as the quality of the water in your cells. So if you start injecting aluminum in people, they become receptors for absorbing increased electromagnetic fields, and that is a perfect storm for the kind of deterioration of the species, which is what we're now experiencing. And I'm just going to finish with one more thing, which I like too, is a quote from Rudolf Steiner. And by the way, this was around 1917, so there was a different time. In times when there were no electrical currents, when the air was not swarming with electrical influences, we're talking 1917, it was easier to be human. For this reason, in order to be human at all today, it is necessary to expend much stronger spiritual capacities than was necessary a century ago. So I'll just leave you with whatever you can do to increase your spiritual capacities, because it's really damn hard to be a human being these days.
Members, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Sharon Goldberg. I'm an internal medicine physician. I've practiced medicine for 21 years, and my background is mostly academic, internal medicine, hospital-based, clinical research, and medical education. Wireless radiation has biological effects, period. This is no longer a subject for debate when you look at PubMed and the peer-reviewed literature. These effects are seen in all life forms: plants, animals, insects, microbes. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There is no question. So 5G is not a conversation about whether or not these biological effects exist. They clearly do. Wireless radiation and other electromagnetic fields, such as magnetic fields and dirty electricity, have been clearly associated with elevated blood sugar and diabetes. That is what the peer-reviewed literature says. It is not opinion. The closer you live to a cell tower, the higher your blood glucose. That is based on hemoglobin A1C measurements. So the idea with small cells of putting the cells closer to people's homes and bedrooms scientifically is very dangerous. And from an economic perspective, it's dangerous. Once again, we have, so the other epidemics that clearly link from the science with electromagnetic radiation are related to mental health. And this is straight from PubMed. This isn't my opinion. This is science. Okay?
For those of us who aren't physicians, what is PubMed?
I'm sorry. It's just it's our National Library of Medicine. This is where you would go. This is just the peer-reviewed literature. So we have three that clearly, they're essentially one epidemic. We have deterioration of mental health in the United States. And if you look really at the science, what does it show? And these are suicide in violent, so shootings and the opioid And I don't have 5 minutes is not the time to talk about this. This is in the peer-reviewed literature. I have a file to submit for the record, but these are facts. These are things that have just been glossed over by the wireless industry, and I really don't have time to talk about them in 5 minutes. I wish I did. But we need to examine our in the context of our EMF exposures. What does that mean? That means that the CDC tracking these we need to start measuring how much radiation are people being exposed to, and before we roll out 5G. And this means there are 4 kinds of electromagnetic fields that we know are harmful to human health. So radio frequency radiation, magnetic fields, dirty electricity, and electric fields, okay? Our exposure, any given person, and all humans are affected by EMFs. Our given exposure has nothing to do with the research that my colleagues are going to cite with the National Toxicology Program. That is an assessment of the risk of one cell phone in the near field, okay? What is our exposure in a day? It's not one cell phone. It's cell phones, it's multiple wireless networks, it's smart meters, it's cell towers. It's this sandwich, and it all adds up. And this is a serious problem for occupational health, public safety, and personal safety. And I feel that it's irresponsible to be even talking about the Internet of Things and rolling out a new untested technology when we're not even measuring what are our current exposures from the current networks.
That we're on. It's not the virus that's getting people sick. It's 5G network from the radiation. And it's not the virus that's getting people sick. It's 5G network from the radiation. And the reason why they have me surrender my Geiger counter is so if I'm in proximity of people that have 5G networks, my Geiger counter is going to detect that I'm in a proximity of radiation. My Geiger counter is going to detect that I'm in a proximity of radiation. That's what's getting people sick. That's what's getting people with respiratory issues. That's why some people are dying.
No. It's not people. It's the 5G radiation that they're pumping out. Number one, through your phone. Number two, through these cell towers that they're installing right now as you're at home in your cozy house. Number three, you wouldn't need a mandatory curfew unless you were doing something illegal to the people who didn't know.
So you know what's crazy? The symptoms that they're saying is caused by this virus are the same exact symptoms from radiation contamination. They're talking about loss of taste, loss of smell, hair loss, vomiting, diarrhea. Pretty soon they're going to say a new symptom is blood in your stool and blood in your urine. Constant parchness, that you'll have an unquenchable thirst because radiation boils the water molecules in your brain, in your respiratory tract, and in your reproductive system. So don't be surprised when this shit disappears and 10 years later it comes back, because that's what's going to happen. You can't produce. So don't be surprised when this shit disappears and 10 years later it comes back, because that's what's going to happen. You're sterile and you can't produce. There was a movie called Children of Men or The City of Men.
Children of Men, right.
Where a war came out and for years no one was able to reproduce. But one woman gave birth to a baby and it changed the world.
So family, I just want to leave off with saying that I find this whole 5G electromagnetic radiation and exactly what it does to us humans. And when I say humans, what do I mean by that? Check out the root word hue, H-U-E. That means a person of color. And then you add the word man to hue, you get the word human. And so, of course, you have to drop the E in order to get the word human that we know today. H-U-M-A-N, human. But it's interesting that we have a group of people, it seems, it appears, on our planet Earth who is out to destroy the human race. That's what it appears. I don't know any other way of describing it when you have a group of people who make products, create viruses, create weapons of mass destruction, and every other tool to destroy humankind. I'd say we have a major problem. And so I've listened to several different people, and I've recently changed my position, because before I was on the page that perhaps this was a virus that was, purposely transplanted, from a lab or something of that sort, and it was taken to China and disseminated or something of that nature. Just out of curiosity, because of course we know that the media told us where it originated from, Wuhan, China. And so we've gone on that tangent that this virus came from Wuhan, China. And that's all we've been saying, and that's how we've been pointing our fingers. And so trying to understand that, we've come to find out that, well, wait a minute, that's where they actually implemented the first installation of the 5G network. And if you've listened to some of the scientists talk about the results of installations of electrical systems in our ozone layers and exactly what it does to us humans, that is not healthy for us at all. And when you start putting the information together from the scientists who explained how the pandemic back in 1918, how it began, and how it all got started with when we started putting out this radar equipment and all this different type of satellites in our atmosphere. Where there's an action, there's always a reaction. And as humans, we're finding these things out. All of a sudden, we have all these new type of cancers and things of this nature. And most of us, we've looked around at each other and wondered, where did this come from? Is it the water? Is it the food that they're feeding us? Is it the chemtrails? It's probably all of the above. And then while I'm on that point, let me say this. Who's to say that these vaccines that it appears that they've come out with already isn't a major part of the problem that's killing human beings? Who's to say that that's not happening? Because we do remember the Tuskegee experiment, in that where they've had a cure and that they didn't provide that cure to African American men that they so-called observed and studied like animals. These are the people I'm talking about. And so when you start listening to some of this other footage and some of these other points of views from other people, you start tending to back away from this idea that maybe it came from these labs here in the United States and it was taken to China and it was released out of the labs and this and that and this. Wait a minute. Let's hold up a minute. Who's to say it's not the 5G? I've heard a very influencer, a YouTube influencer, who I happen to subscribe. I'm subscribed to this guy and I listen to him, and I'm sure you guys probably know who I'm talking about. But he's on a whole tangent of something else, saying that no, you guys got it wrong, it's not the 5G. But yet I've heard doctors actually come out and say, yes, it's the 5G. Back to that installation of the 5G network in Wuhan, and how a pandemic arises and surfaces anywhere from 4 to 6 to 8 months later. And voila, we had an epidemic that came out of Wuhan, China. Lo and behold, with the 5G network installed. And so they're trying to make it appear to be so many different things. There's so much misinformation out in the world. And when we have a leader like a Donald Trump or Trump, I get his name mixed up. I don't have his name down like that. But nonetheless, when you have a leader like that saying things like it's the Kung flu and it's the Chinese virus and stuff like that, I mean, there's a lot of finger pointing, a lot of things said that's just not true. And it takes somebody to step back and start connecting the dots, start putting together a lot of the notes. And so while I'm on that point, I want to give a shout out to Papa Duck, because Papa Duck is who I got part of my audio from. Papa Duck has put out some really good videos exposing a lot of good information. If you are not subscribed to him, I'm just giving them a shout out. I would check them out if I was you. So with that, I'm going to close out. This is Black World TV, the new black media, your black and intelligent news source. I hope you like and share this video, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. Last but not least, yes, I heard what the scientist said. He said we are electrical beings. I thought that was very good points that he made, and that's why I gave you that audio footage. But I wanted to add that aside from being just electrical beings, he should have added, we too are spiritual beings, first and foremost. So with that, this is Black World TV, the new black media, your black and intelligent news source. We'll see you in the next video. Peace out.